Hi, so I'm Pharaoh Cobalt, and before I even get into the too long didn't watch portion of this, I just want to say that this is, you know, something I haven't done before, but I really wanted to get more comfortable with making more involved videos rather than just me uploading VODs or what have you. And I'm a little bit nervous because it's cringe. Anytime you do something new like this, it's going to be cringe. I'm more nervous about like my voice, and I don't think I have a very authoritative voice, so I'm not sure if I'm like the right person to be making this kind of video. And I also know that a lot of my takes are super hot takes. I know that 90% of the people that watch this will not agree. Not that I expect many people to watch this. So I'm just going to try to get right into it. As I've worked on this script and watched it grow, I decided it would be best to put a too long didn't watch at the beginning. So TLDW, overall, I think WoW is a victim of itself. It's a 20-year-old game that has been in an arms race against its players the entire time to make a continually more challenging content. As great as this is, don't get me wrong, I love the adrenaline of timing a push key. There's a threshold where the complexity of moment-to-moment gameplay becomes unfun for a large portion of the current players and begins pushing away new players. And personally, I think Dragonflight, and especially The War Within, has crossed that threshold. Unfortunately, I'm not sure Blizzard or the player base have it in them to reverse course. The things that are needed, i.e. cutting button bloat, reducing overall complexity and punishment, homogenization across some roles and classes, i.e. a universal dispel for healers, tends to be more of a one-way street. It's very hard to go back to simpler design, so I have to be 100% honest here, all tuning issues aside, which there are plenty, and focusing just in terms of their fundamental design philosophy, I don't see it getting better anytime soon. Alright, so first of all, hi. This is my first video that I've included my voice. I actually meant to have it in other videos as well, but I just fucked up the recording in OBS and I only got my Mythic Plus teammates' voice over Discord and didn't record my own. So sorry to them for making them sound like a group of schizophrenics talking to a ghost. Why am I making this video? I love this game and I want it to be better. There's nothing else in gaming that I have found that is a competitive, cooperative experience like Mythic Plus. What do I want this video to achieve? Man, I'm just yapping. I've got like 13 subscribers. I expect this to get like 4 views, and it's because I'm going to send it to a couple friends and a girl I'm talking to because she likes when I yap about stuff. I don't expect people to react. I don't expect Blizzard to see it, and I don't expect if either of those things do happen for anyone to give a fuck about what I have to say. All that being said, who am I? I'm a semi-competitive Mythic Pluser. I'm a middle ground player around 3200 IO. I've been on tournament realms for the TGP, and I've competed in community events like the DDI. I'm not a title player, but I'm also not a casual. There was a comment on Max on the Podyssey not too long ago about who are people who go beyond 10s but aren't pushing for title, and hi, that's me. First things first. I'd like to run through a quick thought experiment for the purposes of setting up a baseline for what the actual state of Mythic Plus participation currently is. If you're not interested in me doing some autistic math, skip ahead to the timecode on screen, I'll put it somewhere. For the end result and the actual talking about what I think Mythic Plus's current challenges are. If you are interested in how I estimate numbers, stick around. So first off, on the competitive WoW subreddit, there are 2 weekly posts going over key completion and participation. The first one is from u/nightstalker314, who aggregates data to compare keys that are completed versus timed to find out which dungeons are having the most trouble, what's more popular, etc. What are people doing for their weekly keys and everything. And the second one is a well-known line graph from u/zmeiser, who takes the data from Night Stalker's bar graph and distills it down, essentially saying how many keys were run this week. So as of working on this right now, the graph I'm using is from January 13th and is discussing participation from week 16 of season 1 in The War Within. The number of keys run this past week were 733,556. It's not the worst, we did have a small bump. It's important to keep in mind that this number is of keys completed, which means if Tom, Dick, and Harry break a 6, it's not counted. Unfortunately, I don't believe there's any way for us to track non-completed runs. Keeping in mind completed does not mean timed. So we don't have data on abandoned runs, but I would roughly estimate that around 10 to 15% of runs are abandoned. I believe it's been discussed by the devs before that the vast majority of runs are completed, far beyond what community perception is, and I think 15% is conservative. So in an attempt to have the best picture of total Mythic Plus participation, let's extrapolate that information and make the total runs for the week 862,964. Now, 862,964 is the total runs for the week, not unique characters and not unique players or accounts. There's a lot of variance in how many keys one person may run in a week. On one end of the spectrum, you're going to have people who run a single weekly key for a single vault slot and log off. And on the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have people like JB or Growl or Dorky or any number of people pushing for title who are quite literally running keys back to back 7 days a week for 8+ hours a day. I think the most fair assessment is probably somewhere around 3 to 4 keys per person per week. I think the vast majority of people, especially at this point of the season, have one main and 1 or 2 alts. They come home from work, do a key or 2 or 3, and then log off. So let's say on average, 4 keys per person per week. So we'll divide by 4. That is 215,741 players. Now again, this is over the course of a week, so there's going to be variance in time and day. We're going to take the easy way out and average it across 7 days. We're doing the physics, imagine the bird is a sphere strategy. The new number is roughly 30,820. This means that in general, roughly, if you were to log on at any given day, there's about 30 to 31,000 people who are trying to do the same thing as you on that day. Also keep in mind this includes all regions, so more realistically, maybe like 15,000 if you're on the North American clusters of servers, and that's being generous, I think. Now, let's imagine you wake up on a Saturday morning, have some coffee and breakfast, and say, I want to play some Mythic Plus. You log in, 15,000 people to play with that day. Now let's say you do the same thing and you want to play CS2. As of right now, at 3:50 a.m. on a fucking Tuesday when I'm typing this, I work nights, I'm not... you'll have to have a little bit of backup there. I work nights, don't worry. SteamDB has CS2 at 794,143 people in-game, with a 24-hour peak of 133 million. I want to make it perfectly clear that I know we are comparing a single game mode in a larger game to a behemoth like Counter-Strike, but the reality of wanting to play Mythic Plus, if you are a Mythic Plus gamer, you want as many people to queue with and run dungeons as possible. The more people, the more groups, the more you get to play. And I'm sorry to say this, but 15,000 at any given moment in the game mode that you want to play is just bad. Like, people are shitting on games like BDO, saying dead game. Brother, there are 23,000 people in right now just on Steam alone, and keep in mind most players play on the dedicated launcher for BDO. As far as you're concerned, if you're strictly a Mythic Plus gamer, BDO is winning. So that's the reality we're dealing with, so let's talk about it. Welcome back to anyone who skipped ahead to avoid me ranting. The end result was there isn't nearly as many people running keys at any given moment as you think. I do have some general broad complaints about WoW's current state of Blizzard, and this, I'm going to preface this, this is where I had a really long rant about quality control and the content cadence, and if you can imagine it, like, you know, we're talking about microtransactions and everything else, like any problem that anyone would ever have at Blizzard, if you can imagine it, I ranted about it. I deleted, I think, 2 pages worth of stuff because I want to try to keep this relatively contained, strictly to like the Mythic Plus experience, and I didn't want it to end up coming out like some sort of cringe lord manifesto. So I'm just going to leave it with like the little bit that I left in here. Basically, every game is a product. They have to make money to keep the servers going, and they deserve to make a profit for the work they put in. I don't think anyone is disputing that. But I really personally believe that you can tell when someone is making a game versus making a product. And when you're making a product instead of a game, you're going to start working towards MVP, which is the minimum viable product. And honestly, I only see 3 possible explanations for the general state of WoW at the moment. Either Blizzard doesn't care, or they do care and they're incompetent, or it's intentional. And none of those options are acceptable for me personally as a player to continue my journey with them. All right, so let's get into the actual stuff that I think is wrong. Another caveat. First things we're going to cover is something that is not a problem in Mythic Plus participation, and that is delves. There's been this pervasive idea within the community that delves are siphoning players out of low keys because the gear from delves means that there's zero reason to run the bottom half of keys. And I'm sorry to be the one to break this to you, but that just isn't the case. People are playing low keys just as much as they always have been. The numbers say this, and we're going to break them down. And you could just log on, open LFG, and look at what's listed. Here's a spreadsheet that I had to sit down and do manually for all the math. I'm going to put that on screen. I would have preferred to be able to thin down the ranges here because I do think including +8s is a bit disingenuous of what's considered a quote-unquote low key by most players, and it is a breakpoint in participation because it's run for crest, which you can see in the bottom portion of the data. But unfortunately this is the data that we had, caveat that I will have a correction for this later. The main takeaway is delves haven't done much to participation, and it's been overblown by the community largely, is my personal opinion. If anything, they probably gave some casual players the starting gear to give keys a try because many of them wouldn't try them because of the reputation that Mythic Plus has. And a lot of casuals are hesitant to even give it a try unless they vastly outgear the content. I mean, we're talking going into a 2 with like 605, 610 gear. I'm speaking from like experience from what I've seen and also how I started playing WoW. But the myth of someone getting a bunch of hero gear in delves and then jumping into a 7 as their first key is just not true. Overall, low-key participation has dropped by a total of 3.65%, I will be correcting this in a second, as compared to Dragonflight Season 4. Okay, now the addendum here. I actually had a very good conversation about this going back and forth with a Reddit user called u/attitudeadjuster.se. As an aside, both of us are using the stats data from Raider.io for these numbers, which you need a Patreon to access. So I'd like to include some screenshots of our conversation along with the spreadsheets that he or she also made. The main point is that we came to an agreement that the rough estimate of low-key participation drop is likely around the 10% range. We have a minor disagreement to the percentile amount that delves contribute to that change, but like I said in my final response, if we're 2% in a disagreement, we're probably on the same page. So I'd really like to thank them for the peer review and also giving me the opportunity to nerd out with someone about something like this. I genuinely enjoyed it. I like making spreadsheets and stuff. So, okay, now that that's out of the way, why Mythic Plus sucks? Number one, it's too fucking hard. Full stop. This includes cast, coordination, damage scaling. I have a hybrid system I'll be explaining later as an alternative. The UI, reliance on weak auras, tank and healer changes, the CC changes, general dungeon design, etc. So I guess we'll just start from the top. Cast, there's too many, and it requires too much kick coordination. The game in general seems to be going in a direction that heavily incentivizes playing over voice, and I think this is a negative for what is expected in Mythic Plus pugging. And by expected, I mean what the general player base is expecting. Using voice has a different perception in something like a competitive shooter than it does in an MMO, and no one is going to use the in-game voice, so now you're having people move to Discord, and yes, this does happen in push keys when you're pugging, but for the general player base, I don't believe that going in this direction of complexity is beneficial to engagement. That's not to say that I don't want Mythic Plus to be complex, but let's say we mass pull 20 mobs. I think 3, maybe 4 of those mobs should have a kick, and I think that kick should have a big wind-up and a visual. It should be very obvious that this is happening and it needs to be stopped, and it should not be so punishing that if you overlap from not being in voice that it rapidly cascades and becomes a wipe. For example, currently there are so many kicks that if you overlap or miss one, there's too many things happening at the same time that someone can't come in as a backup. UI and reliance on weak auras is the next bullet point. I should have clarified that. What the fuck? Like, why do I need 8 weak auras to track the various stacking buffs and debuffs that my class has at any given time? So I know that what I can and cannot do at any given moment to play efficiently. Why do I need a plater profile to even begin parsing what is on the screen and what is most important? Why do I need Omni CC and Omni CD to know what my team is doing and what's available? Why do I need to download a weak aura pack to better track the mechanics that are happening in a key? Fix it, please. You can't see it, but I've got my hands in the air right now. Like, what's going on? I'm gonna pull up a screenshot from a stream of JB stream. I have disgusting amount of channel points in JB stream. Where I just want to ask, how is any new player supposed to parse and fully understand what's happening on the screen here? How are they supposed to do it if they don't have Plater or Weakors or Omni CC and Omni CD? There is simply an unmanageable amount of mechanics at any given moment in a pool, and I think they need to cut the amount of mechanics each trash mob has in half, and that's just a starting point. Okay, damage scaling. Here we go, rant 2, so strap in. I'm actually going to take a quick sip of my Pepsi here, but I'm going to stop the recording. Alright, damage scaling. First off, I like that Mythic Plus scales. I like that it scales infinitely. Asmongold suck my dick. What I don't like is the current iteration of damage scaling. Keys should be a race for DPS and route optimization before they become a survivability check. That's strictly just my opinion. I think it's more fun. How do they obtain this? I'm glad you asked, dear listener. A hybrid damage system. Don't ask me for an exact ratio, I'm not a dev, but I think we should strive for something like 70% scaling, 30% percentile damage. What I mean by that is auto attacks, spell A, B, C, boss ability H and J, whatever. All those things should scale with key level. But let's say trash mob ability X that needs to be kicked does 65% of the player's health regardless of key level. This boss pulsing AoE ability does 15% of damage to players per tick. This trash ability that has a very long wind up and can't be stopped does 90% of a player's health before any DRs. This solves multiple problems. First of all, it prevents situations where we have specific mobs or abilities that feels multiple key levels harder than the rest of the dungeon. Just as an aside, if anybody remembers the spear hunter guys in Notheris or whatever, that was fucking ridiculous with that bleed. Like that's what I'm talking about. It makes tuning generally easier for the devs when, say, maybe the boss pulsing AoE is still a bit too rough, so let's make it so it does 12% per tick. Maybe it was too easy, now it does 20%. And importantly, very importantly, I'm jingling the keys, on the key ring. I'm doing the Markiplier to get bit. It means that the thing that is dangerous in a 15 will be just as dangerous in a 2. And it'll help people learn faster without being too overcomplicated. It'll provide consistency to their runs as they learn and improve. They know that this boss ability will always hurt. This mob needs to be kicked. This can't be stopped and it hurts and you better press a defensive. Alright, point number 2. The tank and healer shortage. We all knew it was coming. We'll start with my issues with tanks. First and foremost, I'm not a tank main. I do play tanks in other games like Final Fantasy XIV, but when it comes to WoW, my experience of the tanking experience is a little bit more limited. But I've done enough to be able to see the problems, and I'm in tune enough with the community to be able to relay some of those problems. The main factors, in my opinion, are threat management, pacing, bloat, responsibility overload, and the community's reaction to those previous issues. We can talk about extremely punishing outgoing damage, but that's more of a tuning knob issue, and a big one to be fair, but I'm focusing primarily on core design philosophy. Alright, threat management. WoW is a lot less lenient in terms of tank threat multiplier. There are very few other games, to the point that I can't think of any off the top of my head, where threat management as a tank is actually a major factor. I find new tanks, including myself when I tank in WoW, struggling to gather mobs and maintain threat. Especially at the start of a pool. Dungeon layout and mob placement can also make this more challenging compared to other games. For example, Final Fantasy XIV has a pretty consistent placing of their mobs, so that if you are skilled and you know your class and you kind of have that mental image of how far your abilities are, you can go into the center of that pack, hit your AoE one time, you're going to hit every single mob. And that's just not the case in WoW. It's more sporadic in WoW, which I get that, it's an immersion thing, but if we're talking about what is a barrier for new tanks, this is one of those barriers. The pacing in WoW outside of raid content is also very fast, which then compounds the threat management problems. This is most noticeable in Mythic Plus, also due to the need for fast, consistent threat application and kicks and utility in a typical pool. Tanks in WoW have experienced significant button bloat. The lack of any form of homogenization across specs and roles has also compounded this issue, and Continuing from that button bloat, tanks have too much responsibility between threat management, kicks and stops, utility, defensive rotation, routing on top of regular pressure being the quote-unquote leader of any given group, and the knowledge that if you die, it's most likely a wipe. Tanking in WoW becomes a sort of mountain of responsibility that the vast majority of players, new and old, do not want to tackle. Whether it's because they feel unsure of their abilities to tank or simply don't want to have that much pressure when playing a video game, when the alternative is play DPS that has like so much less responsibility on a moment-to-moment basis. Lastly, because of everything above, and because the current endgame modes are so punishing for failure, the constant pressure of the timers in Mythic Plus, or even simply the efficiency-focused community in non-timed content like time walking, this funnels players into being vastly more critical of tank and support players if they don't perform optimally, further scaring away anyone who may want to give the role a try. And again, why would someone deal with all of the above and get yelled at for it when they can just do the rotation and kicks as a DPS and follow the tank? As for healers, I'm a healer main. Honestly, a lot of the same shit. Too much responsibility, it's too hard, the wonky damage scaling, the community's response to that extra pressure and failure. I don't have a whole lot to say. It's just in a rough spot. The only thing I'm going to say, kind of in direct response to Automatic Jack, not that he would ever see this, please stop advocating for inflated health pools. It doesn't matter if we have 500,000 health or 5 million if Blizzard can't properly tune outgoing damage and people are getting whacked for 80% of their HP regardless. The outcome of how it feels to heal is the same. We're playing whack-a-mole. It doesn't matter. This is purely a numbers and tuning problem, and player health, either in one direction or the other, I simply don't think is the solution. I do agree with him on his take, though, about defensive bloat. As a final mention on how I feel about class design in Mythic Plus, I think the game needs some homogenization. I know WoW players are very against this, but hear me out. I'm not advocating that WoW becomes Final Fantasy XIV, but why do some healers have some dispels and others don't? Don't say flavor or I'll run you over with a car. I'm an alliance member in a party with a Tauren rogue and a Drakthir priest. That ship has sailed. Personally, Dispel should be universal. Give every healer a B-res. Give every DPS in rage. Bish bash boom. Half the I can't get involved complaints are gone. Every single spec in the game should have a kick. Every kick should have a normalized cooldown. Kicks should work like dispels. If you miss it, it doesn't go on cooldown. But Feral, what about PvP? There's PvP in this game? Also, they have the technology so that different abilities interact differently in 5-man content already. It would literally just be a back-end toggle upon entering a key, so stop being so obtuse about this whole thing. Like, they need to fix kicks. Lastly, please revert the CC changes. I don't know what Blizzard's obsession is with making us play slower. If I wanted to tactfully pull a single pack, sheep one mob and mind control another, and kill 3 mobs at a time, I'd go play Classic. Let us blast. This is a speedrun game mode. A lot of the recent changes just seem so antithetical to what Mythic Plus even is. I genuinely don't understand where this new philosophy has come from because it wasn't always like this. Alright, more broad issues with the concept of Mythic Plus and the community. There's a separation of the players among casuals, raiders, and Mythic Plus. The issue I come across in my experience with the community is really the gatekeeping of gear. I know this is about as controversial of a topic as it gets in WoW. Everyone has an opinion on what gear should drop from what, who deserves it, whatever. I have a very extreme opinion. I don't think anyone agrees with it. I have not met a single person who agrees with me. Even my friends call me a dumbass for this. I'm going to share it anyways. I just want to get it out in the world. And then I'll give a more moderator post that I think people can agree with. My take, personal, my take on gear for Mythic Plus. Just Mythic Plus. Give us tournament realm vendors that scale in a key the way PvP gear scales in Battlegrounds and Arena. I don't want to raid to get some stupid trinket or farm crest just so I can slam keys. Playing on the tournament realms is the most fun I have in this game because that's what it is. You'll go in, you buy exactly what you want, and then you just go have fun. Now, a more moderate approach to the gear problem is to give us some deterministic outcomes. give us dinars that can get any piece of gear in the game, in the current season from Raid or Mythic Plus. I know they're doing a dinar system for raiding in Season 2. I don't think that's enough. I think it should be for Mythic Plus too. That's just my opinion. I think they should make the dinar come from the vault vendor and require the same amount of tokens as a socket. And I think they should make it so you need 3 dinars to pick a piece of gear. This gives the vault bad luck protection. It's still faster to gear through the vault regularly than simply skipping and taking dinars, so people won't be best in slot too fast. And it makes it so Mythic Plus players don't have to raid for a single item. And it makes it so raiders don't have to farm Mythic Plus for a single item. Everyone wins, everyone's happy. And best of all, the world first raiders can shut the hell up because it won't affect them because the raid will be dead by the time the first dinar is out. Or at the very least it should be, and if it's not, that's Blizzard's fault for tuning the raid too hard, but that's a whole separate video. One last thing on keys and punishment. I want to make it clear that I don't think keys are too punishing because of depletes or the timer or the death affix. I think the core design philosophies within the keys are too punishing, but the failure states I don't really have any problem with. I think the one achievement they have is a good idea where it stops depletes, but I'm going to parrot what a lot of other people have asked and say, who is it for? I mean, let me ask you this. Why don't we have a separate achievement that makes it so your key doesn't deplete below a certain level for having every dungeon timed at, let's say, a 4, and then 8, and then 10 and 12. And then after that is no man's land. Sure, I've got no problem with that. But it's not the top end of players that need help right now. At least not when we're talking about the overall health of Mythic Plus and the overall participation. Alright, I think that's enough. If you're watching this and you're not in my immediate friend circle, first of all, how did you even get here? But also, thank you for sticking around to the end. I'll be honest, I don't know how to end this video. I've never made a script or anything before. I just really wanted the game to be as good as it could be. What will I be doing in the meantime? Like, what's the future of the channel now that I'm not really doing much WoW stuff? I'm playing better games that are more focused on fun. I'm having a blast in PoE 2 right now, and I'd like to start making content around it, especially when the new patch drops and we get more content. I'll have to come back in Season 2 in WoW to test the Holy Priest changes because that's my main. But I'll be honest, I don't think they're doing enough. And I'm recording this now on the 24th. I wrote the script on the 13th. I'm recording this on the 24th, and I did just see data mine changes where they nerfed Holy Priest again, which actually made me laugh out loud. Like, Holy Priest is just in a completely dire state. That's I could write a whole manifesto about Holy Priest. So I'll probably run some low keys, get Keystone Master, Keystone Hero, and then I'll leave again. For the time being, I have let my subscription run out because I'm one of those people who believes that if you're going to complain as much as I am right now in this video about a game, you should probably speak with your wallet and stop playing it. And that's what I've done. It's just I'm not having fun. Other than that, I'm going to be playing some other MMOs. I really like BDO. And trust me, I know that is a controversial thing to say, but I grew up playing Korean grind MMOs like Nine Dragons and Flife, so it has a soft spot in my heart. So, I might make some more content around BDO. I might make some content around Final Fantasy XIV. I don't know. I'm a really big casual in Final Fantasy. Blah 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 blah. Really big casual in Final Fantasy XIV. You can tell I'm going off script at this point. Yeah, so I don't expect I'll make a whole lot of content for 14 unless it's just memes. But for BDO and stuff like PoE 2, and then I'd like to just make more videos talking about gaming in general and life, and maybe doing some like video, just mind dump, like thought kind of things, like just talking at random. Speaking of which, I am acutely aware of the fact that you can hear my breathing. It's driving me crazy. I don't know what to do to fix the setting on the mic to make that not pick up. But yeah, I mean, until Blizzard can have an honest discussion about the real issues in Mythic Plus, I don't have a whole lot of drive to return to the game in a competitive manner. Not when there's so many other good games to play. My backlog on Steam alone is 53 games. So, yeah. See ya.